This guy, folks, has worked for the likes of Amy Grant, B.J. Thomas, Crystal Gale, Peter Cetera of Chicago, Sheryl Crow, one of my favorites, Drifters, The Platters, Casting Crowns, David Phelps, of course, used to be with the Gaither Vocal Band, now a solo artist, Alan Jackson, The Imperials, Carrie Underwood, Chet Atkins, Dolly Parton, Connie Smith, Gene Watson and the Nealons, Spears, Thamps and Statesman, and the list goes on and on. In fact, we posted a little promo, Steve, yesterday on our Facebook site, and I think one of your artists felt like she got slighted because her name wasn't mentioned in that, and that was really not by design. Let me put it that way.
We have not actually recorded together yet, and so I told her you were probably just picking names that your fans would know. So I think we're good there. I've talked to her since. So.
Well, mentioning all these artists, and they're from different types of music, different genres, whatever, you have to be pretty flexible, Steve, to go into different styles, right?
Well, that used to be the job of a studio musician. A road musician is no less or no better than a studio musician, but a road musician goes out night after night and plays the same songs over and over and over. The old-fashioned studio musician had to be adept in all kinds of styles, because when you show up for a session at 10 o'clock, you don't necessarily know what you're going to be playing. You may be playing rock and roll, you may be playing old-fashioned country, you may be playing reggae, you may be playing bossa nova. You just don't know. So we always listened to a lot of different things and tried to make ourselves available for most styles of music. I do not do rap, but then I don't consider that music. So
you and me both. Sort of backing away from the music, you were mentioning your dad being from Livonia, and he had several brothers in the Livonia area, Horace, James, Harold, and Joel.
Joel.
And they sung as a quartet back in the, 50s, 60s?
Yeah, late 50s and early 60s, very early 60s. When they disbanded, my dad started a singing group with our family, and we made our first record in 1964. So they had stopped traveling by 63 or 62, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I wasn't born then, but I've heard all about. I heard all about you guys. But
of course, you sang with us many times.
Yeah,
there at the Mount Olivet Church of God.
What was it like traveling with your family? Was that tough or fun or whatever?
Well, it was both. You know how it is to travel. You may have not. We were out of Greenville, so if we had a weekend down in Charleston, that was a 4.5 hour drive down, 4.5 hour driving back after you've done whatever services you are going to do, and you're dog tired, and you still got that 4.5 hour drive back. We didn't have the bus, and we didn't have a bus driver who slept while we sang and then drove us home. So but I wouldn't take anything for the joy of being with my family. We're a very, very close family, and of course my dad has passed away, and I miss him every day. But my brother lives here in Nashville. He does the same thing that I do. He has a incredible list of clients that he has worked for. Some of them are the same, like Gaither Vocal Band. He's done Gaither Vocal Band. I've done Gaither Vocal Band. So we kind of both have done that one. But then he has his own that I haven't done, and I have my own that he hasn't done. But the family, my mom is still doing well. She turns 85 this year. And family is everything to me. I'm very strong on family.
And let me mention, too, that your mom is a very accomplished musician as well, and does a fantastic job, mainly known, I guess, as a piano player, right?
Yes. She is as fine quartet pianist as you will find anywhere. She plays the stride piano style, the swinging left hand, and she is very good. In fact, that's where my music started, was her teaching piano. And of course, my dad had me singing when I was 5 years old. Too bad that didn't take, but anyway, yeah, she in her own right has her own style and abilities beyond what I can even do and what Russell can do.
Well, you're talking about Russell, Steve, and I'm going to ask a loaded question. He may be listening and want to answer this himself, but is there, you guys doing some of the same type of work? Is there any sibling rivalry there in Nashville?
You know what? There is none between me and my brother. I did Gaither Vocal Band before he did Gaither Vocal Band. And you just have to understand the music business. I did Gaither Vocal Band because the producer was Michael Sykes at the time, and he was a very good friend of mine. And so he hired me to do strings for Gaither Vocal Band. Later, Russell was doing choral sessions and singing with Guy Penrod, and they switched over, and Guy started producing. So Guy was friends with Russell, and he asked Russell to do arrangements for Gaither Vocal Band. And out of that, Russell wrote a cappella piece for the vocal band to sing at a basketball game, and it went major blockbusters. Everybody wanted it, and it wound up being a big print thing for him. And so then he eventually moved into producing the Gaither Vocal Band. But, you know, it doesn't matter which of the Mauldin brothers you call, just call one of us.
Yeah, that's a good advertisement. Someone just stepped in here and told me to make mention. They said we didn't mention your father's name. It was Horace Mauldin. And
Horace L. Mauldin.
Yeah.
He was a songwriter.
Exactly.
And a lyric tenor singer. And he taught us how to carry our own parts. I made my first record in '64 at the age of 9, and I'm carrying a harmony part. I'm singing the really high part. And at age 9, I was carrying parts, and you know, that all was because he taught me how to do that. And I had a lot of ear, so I was teachable for that. But that part came from him.
And Steve, as far as the Southern Gospel side, Midnight Cry, Gold City Quartet at the time, I think, that's one of the most popular songs I think ever. And when I hear the opening bars of that song with the strings, I always think of you, because you are the one who wrote the strings, right?
Yes. Actually, I did that whole album. We wrote strings and brass and flutes and all kinds of stuff on that album. Funny story about that is Eldridge Fox from the Kingsman Quartet. He produced that album. So he came to Nashville and we met, and he said, I want you to take this record and I want you to just orchestrate the hound out of it. He said, whatever you need, strings, brass, whatever. He said, this is the weakest album these boys have ever made. He said, I don't even have a single off of this album. So I want you to beef something up so I can at least get a single out of it.
Wow.
But it was a sleeper song. You know, it was a good track, but it was just a track. There wasn't any color to it hardly. It was just a rhythm track, you know. And, of course, then Ivan Parker put that sensational vocal of his on there. And so, you know, it started hitting on all cylinders after that. But it wasn't one that we had picked out from the beginning to be the big single, you know.
As far as producing goes, orchestrating, writing orchestrations, arranging, what is your favorite thing to do there? What is your favorite
My favorite thing is variety. If I just did one of those things all of the time, I think I would go crazy.
You're crazy anyway, but...
Well, yeah, I would go crazier. But yeah, I enjoy one day doing a gut-level country old standard, you know, and then this week, actually tomorrow, I'll be in the studio with a 45-piece orchestra doing a cantata written by a man of Catholic faith that's extremely classical, completely different from anything else that I do on a day-to-day basis. And I really enjoy that variety, I have studied to, be able to have flexibility, and I really enjoy, one day I'm doing choral sessions, and one day I'm doing guitar overdubs, and one day it's rock and roll, and one day it's country, so I like the mixture of that,
Talking about rock and roll and country, I mentioned Sheryl Crow. What did you do on her albums?
Well, not all of those are albums. Some of those are live shows. Sheryl Crow, a couple of years ago, came to Belmont University where I was teaching, and she did our Christmas at Belmont concert, which is at the Skirmerhorn here in Nashville, and has a full orchestra setting, and she had done a piece of music at the Kennedy Center, and she didn't have the arrangements to it, so the school asked me to write an arrangement for her, and she sang to my arrangement there.
And of course, you took a teaching position as well, didn't you, a couple of years ago?
I taught at Belmont University for 15 years, yes.
Okay.
I'm not there now, but I did teach for 15 years at Belmont, teaching music notation and private composition lessons, and then the last semester I was teaching orchestration.
And Steve, I think one of the best things that you're known for came by accident, and it showed up on YouTube, and you were telling me the other day you got over 500,000 views on it so far. You want to tell us about
No, I think it actually went to 1.5 million now.
Okay, wow.
It keeps going. I don't understand why.
But we were going to try to get this on at Christmas time, and we failed to do so. But tell us, set this thing up for us.
Well, in 1990, I was at Christ Church as orchestra director, and Christ Church had the famous Christ Church Choir that was well known then, and they had sung on a lot of big albums, Garth Brooks albums, and the Judds and Dolly Parton albums, and so Landy Gardner, the music director, asked me to produce a Christmas album on the Christ Church Choir. So we worked out the budget numbers, and it was a big record, just logistically. So the producer side of me really got worked on that one. So first of all, we had to find the songs. Then I had to arrange the songs, and I had to orchestrate the songs. Then we brought the rhythm section in and recorded the rhythm. And then I had one song that I used all of the musicians from the church so they could be on the album. So that was a whole different setup. And then when we finished, we went to Benson Recording Studio, and we built a 12-by-8 stage for me and Landy Gardner to stand on. And the choir, 200-voice choir, stood on the floor and looked up towards us and sang into the mics. So that was a big job to get done. So we recorded the 200-voice choir, and then we brought in 35 people into the studio with a smaller group so we could get the consonants and the pronunciation and everything so you could understand the words. And then the last thing we had to do was solos. So it was a Friday night. We were going to start the mix on Monday morning. Now, Brian, you know what that means. That means the mix is the last thing you're going to do.
Right.
So all of these solos, I had Tanya Sykes. She was going to sing a solo. I had various different people from the church that were going to sing solos. I had recorded everybody, and the very last one was Guy Penrod. And Guy Penrod did his like 9 o'clock that night. So when he finished, we were going to be through with all of the recording, this big long month's worth of work, and we were going to start the mix on Monday morning. Well, that's during the old tape days, so you didn't have unlimited tracks. So I always like to start the mix with a clean slate. So, any extra noise that was on the tracks, the engineer and myself were going to stay and just clean things up and get it ready. So the engineer was Kevin McManus. He's done many, many of the gospel things that you have played over the years, including the Midnight Cry. And so I went to the store, bought a 6-pack of Mountain Dew. That was before the diet Mountain Dew. That was when I was a little skinnier. And I bought a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts. And I came back to the studio, and we're just cleaning off tracks. And so we got to that last song, and the guy had just finished singing. And he said, guy had much longer hair than I have. He said, do you think it's kind of like Samson? He can sing high because he's got that long hair? I said, oh, no, I can sing high, and I don't have long hair. He says, well, you can't sing what he sang, though. I said, I bet I can. Give me a track. I said, do you have one? He said, yeah, I've got one track left. So went out. That's all the thought that went into it. There was no planning. There wasn't any idea that this was going to be something that would last beyond that night, So we started, and I started, as I sang, I knew it was going to be long, so I started kind of doing things that bad singers have done that I have recorded, like hit a note and it goes flat, but then it goes back sharp before you let go of it, or, mispronounce a word, accent the wrong syllable or something like that, And then when it came to the really high part, I didn't think I could make it. I thought, we'd just crash because the engineer, he's already laughing, and it's just the two of us, just, 11, 12 o'clock at night. So we get to that part, and I just go for it, and I went for it until finally I had to come back down towards the end, and I'm sure I was red or purple, but he's dying. He's just laughing, and that's agging me on,
Now,
So,
what song was this, Steve?
That was the song, Oh Holy Night.
Okay.
Which just happened to be the last song that we had recorded.
Okay.
It wasn't that we picked that song, we wanted to do something to that song. It just was the last one, and we were giddy. We're at the end of a long process, and we were letting off steam. That's all that there was to it, So when we finished, he made a cassette copy, and I played it for my wife the next day, and she goes, oh, that's not funny. That's just not even funny. I was okay. And I played it for Joy and Landy Gardner, and they kind of smiled and said, oh, that's cute, And that's all there was to it, And many, many years later, probably 20 years later, I get a call from my brother Russell, and he says, did you ever sing Oh Holy Night and really screw it up or sing it really bad? I said, well, I did sing it one night to the track we cut for Christ Church, but how did you know? He said, well, somebody just emailed that to me, and as soon as I heard it, I recognized your voice. And I said, well, they couldn't have emailed it because its only copy of it is a cassette tape, and I have the cassette tape, so they couldn't have emailed it to you. He said, well, let me send it to you. Well, he sent it to me, and sure enough, that was the version that I did that night, We don't have any idea how it was released out to the general public. Don't know who released it or how they got a digitized version of it because it was on 2-inch tape the last time I left it, So our only guess is that it kept coming to us from engineers, recording studio engineers.
Uh-huh.
So our guess is we did it as an independent church project, and it got picked up by Star Song. Star Song got bought out by Sparrow. Sparrow got bought out by somebody else, and wound up getting bought out by EMI, which is a big international company. So all we can figure is some engineer late one night was probably transferring the Christ Church masters over to some digital form, and he found that and made himself a copy and started sending it out to people. But I have been unable to trace down its origins. I have tried, and every time they'd say, well, call this guy, and then finally they'd send me back to the first guy I called, so I just, gave up on trying to figure it out. But every Christmas it still plays, and we've had 1.5 million people to hear it, on Facebook, and sometimes they send me notes, and sometimes I'll answer questions online, and it's it's amazing that it wasn't planned. I mean, so many people spend so much money to get 1 million hits on YouTube, and I don't even know how this happened. I think God had a hand in it, because it does make people laugh. And I've had testimonies on Facebook. One guy said, he said, I'm an arranger in Los Angeles, and he said, I go to some very dark places at night on my computer. He said, and I found this by accident, and I can't stop playing it. I just keep playing it over and over and over. And he said, I don't know why. And so I responded, I said, well, the reason is because even though I am singing it really bad and in a comical manner, still the message of the story of Jesus is touching your heart. And I believe God led you there. If you would find you a good full gospel church, you will find out where the light comes from and where the dark comes from, and use it as a testimony.
That's great. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking too, is God lead me to somehow figure out how to get royalties out of this thing? You know what I'm?
Well, trust me, I have checked that out. The problem is that instrumental music and spoken word recordings and comical recordings do not get logged by most radio stations. And we had that same problem with Buddy Emmons and the Swing Shift Band. I was the music director for the Swing Shift Band, and they would play Buddy Emmons all over the country, but they would do it going into a break or do it going into the weather, and they wouldn't log that they had played him.
Right.
So if it doesn't get logged, there's no collection. On top of that, a public domain song only gets 1/10 of the royalties that it would normally get if it was a copyrighted song.
Yeah.
So ASCAP said it's not enough money for us to fool with. So.
Well, that's the thing about instrumentals, and Mike, you can verify this too. That you're right, Steve. We play instrumentals, sometimes going into breaks or coming out of breaks and whatnot, and usually don't play the whole song.
Right.
And that's interesting. If they want to find this on YouTube, Steve, how can they look this up?
Well, all they have to do is type Steve Mauldin, Mauldin, and then it will probably pop up. If not, just type "Oh Holy Night" beside it. And the one with the white cassette tape is the original version that I don't know how somebody got it online. But then after a couple of years, people started saying things on Facebook. People started lip syncing to it, claiming they were the original singer of that, and some were really, really bad. And there's a couple of websites that were looking for the original singer, and a friend of mine at Belmont said, either you call them, you tell them that you're the guy, or we're going to turn you in. We're going to call them and tell them the story. So I did a video of my own, and then re-sang the song, which is not nearly as good because I was, 20 years older and 40 pounds fatter, and I was in bad voice that night. But there's a separate video of me actually showing everything. I show the reel-to-reel tapes. I play a little bit of the version with no singing on it, with the choir on it, and just kind of as a disclaimer so that I could get the real story out, because there were so many people saying so many outrageous things about who that was and why it was the way it was. So I really thought if I will do this video, it'll set the record straight, and then this thing will die, So that did not happen. I've had about 500,000 hits on that video itself. So that, just type my name, Steve Mauldin, into YouTube, and it should come up easy enough.
Steve, we got about a minute or two left. Working with all these artists, country, gospel, rock artists, what is the most funniest thing that you've happened working with these people?
Oh wow. Uh, well, there's one producer friend of mine, and I won't call his name because I wouldn't want to embarrass him. But I wear a lot of different hats, but I have to wear the hat that I'm supposed to wear that night.
Right.
And I can't go in and tell somebody that's doing another arrangement, oh, you need to do this in your arrangement. That would not be cool at all. So I was going to write strings. I was going to tag strings onto a session I had the next morning, and they called me and said, is there any way you could put this one song on for us? And I said, sure. So I went to a studio, and I was waiting on them to finish the vocals. And it was the last measure. And for an hour and a half, this tenor singer was trying to get his last note in tune. This was before vocal tuning. And he was singing it over and over, and the veins in his neck were sticking out. And I couldn't say anything because I was not the producer. Finally, the producer turned around because I got to go home and write, He turned around and says, he don't usually have pitch problems. Do you know what the problem is here? And I said, he's not out of tune. It's the baritone singer. They soloed the baritone singer and said, yeah, it's the baritone singer. Baritone goes in, sings it one time, and it's all over. They start making my tape copy.
Yeah, I hear you. Trying to accuse the wrong guy. That happens with me every time I get accused. That's the wrong guy. Yeah. But Steve, it's been a pleasure to have you with us this morning, and we've wanted to get you on for a while now. And you do a great job. He arranges, produces, and wears a lot of hats there in Nashville. And Steve, you've lived in Nashville for how long now?
Well, I moved here in '81, so
that's been a while.
Yeah, that's
do the math.
been almost 40 years, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Well, continue cranking out some good music, okay?
Well, I sure will, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners, and I hope they'll stay tuned to this channel because I know you guys are FM now, and you're building your station, and just happy to be a part of it.